to mount an effective response that puts Africa on a path to enhance adaptation and build resilience. Building resilience and responding to climate-related disasters is expected to cost African countries 3 to 5% of their GDP annually by 2030. In certain scenarios, this will rise to over 15% of GDP if the present state of half-hearted action persists. Africa must urgently develop a framework that identifies gaps as well as accelerates the development and implementation of transformative adaptation at scale. To these, Africa is leveraging on nature-based solutions, agriculture, and food systems, as well as shifting to renewable, affordable energy. Africa has huge potential to showcase evidence of how nature plays a critical role in building resilience to climate change. Nature-based solutions are a key component to deliver tangible adaptation benefits for people and biodiversity. Africa is on the front line to deliver measurable, nature-based solutions to support adapting to climate change.
Tumefanikiwa kutunza mazingira, tumepanda miti kwenye vyanzo vya maji, vyanzo 11. Mpaka sasa vyanzo hivi vinatiririsha maji. Kwa kuwa jamii inajua kwamba mazingira ni uhai.
By investing in restoring degraded ecosystems, as well as effectively and equitably conserving 30% of Earth's land, fresh water, and ocean habitats, Africa can greatly benefit from nature's capacity and ability. Agriculture is key for all African countries in terms of food security and nutrition, as well as the backbone for socio-economic gains. There is a need to change the way food is produced and consumed by transitioning towards nature-positive food production systems that provide sustainable and nutritious food for all.
To adapt to climate change, we are trying to reclaim our lands using conservation works, and also we are encouraging them to grow small grains which are tolerant to drought. We are trying also to motivate our farmers to keep small stock due to unavailability of grazing area, and water sources are now minimum for the larger stock. So we are encouraging our farmers to also adopt new technologies towards climate change.
Tumepata elimu ya kilimo bora. Nalima kisasa, mfano zao la maharage na viazi. Kipindi cha nyuma sikuwa hivi. Nimetoka pale nilipo na mpaka sasa naendelea vizuri.
Additionally, discussions should also consider securing vital sources of food, such as fish, for vulnerable communities in Africa and beyond. This has great potential for deployment and investment. More than 600 million people in Africa still lack basic access to affordable, reliable, clean energy. Promoting energy efficiency and shifting energy sources to accessible and affordable renewable energy is critical. Africa's energy development agenda should be based on unlocking its massive renewable energy potential in wind, solar, hydro, and geothermal sources. Enhancing adaptation actions alone will not be sufficient to avoid and reduce all the loss and damage from the impacts of climate change we can expect if we do not sufficiently reduce emissions immediately. Despite global shocks, developed countries must now deliver on their promises to mobilize $100 billion per year for climate action to support both adaptation and mitigation strategies. Constructive dialogue with clear commitments and actions are required to realize a new collective goal on climate finance and scale up requirements to address climate urgency beyond 2025.
So for WWF, we really feel the solution is in nature. That nature-based solutions contribute over 30% of the solution to climate change. And Africa has that solution because Africa holds a quarter of the world's biodiversity. And so our governments need to invest in protecting nature. I would like our leaders to put climate and development at the heart of all climate action. Climate change is in our adaptability, and climate change is in our resilience.
This is the Africa strategy. The clock is ticking for Africa and the world to restore balance between people and the planet. This is the Africa strategy. The clock is ticking for Africa and the world to restore balance between people and the planet, to recover from COVID-19, to reach climate and biodiversity goals, including zero loss of natural habitat and zero extinction, to realize everyone's aspirations for a better life, for truly sustainable development. The challenges and opportunities on the continent are great. Africa's population is forecast to double to 2.5 billion people by 2050. There's a growing middle class and a vibrant and dynamic youth. Yet more than a third of Africans live in poverty. At the same time, Africa's biodiversity has fallen by 65% since 1970. By 2050, Africa could lose more than half of its bird and mammal species. Now is the time to seize the moment with inclusive, innovative, and integrated conservation, to share our spaces sustainably, to step forward as a society, to safeguard our living landscapes and seascapes. Now is the time to restore balance. Africa's natural balance sheet is being depleted by destruction of forests, by degradation and pollution of rivers, lakes, and oceans, by conflict between people and wildlife. The Africa strategy sets its sights on a better future. It is a future of shared spaces, shared responsibility, and shared commitment to sustainability. It is rooted in the integrity of facts, science, individuals, communities, and ecosystems. We can make a difference in the natural habitat and the human habitat. Two core impact areas is where we can make a difference. Firstly, we can make a difference in shared spaces, sustainable land, water, and seascapes. Secondly, we can make a difference by making nature count. It is time for a true accounting on nature's value to our lives and livelihoods. We have 7 critical conservation outcomes. We can't do it alone. Join us.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. And please take a seat. Take your coffee or tea from there. And welcome to North Africa and welcome to Africa Day. Welcome to North Africa. Welcome to Egypt. So, I don't know, should I be sitting? It's better like this. Okay. So, thank you for your presence. Thank you for your time and interest in the Africa Day and this opening session of the Africa Day. And happy to be starting with this session, since we are thinking that, as Laurent said, this is the Africa COP and this is also North Africa COP. Happy to have today our guest speakers, and we'll invite happily Madam Janet Rogan, COP26 Ambassador for Africa and Asia. Welcome, Madam. Take a seat. And I will invite also our guest speaker, Mr. Ajay Barai from WWF International, for an opening word. Thank you. So, I will give you this one. So, we are in North Africa. We are in Egypt. We are in a region where we're specifically impacted and specifically concerned by climate change. We are in a region where you can stand in Tanger in Morocco and see Europe. We are in a region when you can stand here in Sharm el-Sheikh and see Asia. We are in a region where water is so important to the level of it creates civilization around Nile. And water also is important and impacted by climate change, where this civilization is heavily impacted by climate change. We are in a region in North Africa where forests in North Africa, in Algeria, Tunisia and Morocco, with the oases are fighting desertification. And also in the region where we look like we are losing that fight with desertification. We are in a region that the Mediterranean Sea is so important to the level that at least 3 or 4 from the most important civilizations around the world were developed around the Mediterranean. The Greek, the Pharaoh in Egypt, the Egyptian, Carthage, and all those Egyptians. And this Mediterranean now, the Sea of North Africa, is warmer and in danger of everyday invasive new species that came around. So the region is impacted heavily by climate change, interested by climate change, and would like to address some of those issues with our panelists today. But I will be happily ask Mr. Rajay Barai to say a brief opening word to this session. So please, Mr. Rajay.
Thank you, Jamel. Welcome again to the Panda Pavilion on Africa Day. It gives me great pleasure to introduce you to WWF in North Africa. We've been working as WWF in North Africa for over 25 years, working on the ground but also at policy levels. And we've been working on a range of topics, including marine, linking particularly to the Mediterranean work, forests, climate, and forests and oases. We've been catalyzing action at a number of levels, and it gives me an honor to talk about some of that work, but you'll hear more from North Africa colleagues later in this session. But we also need to recognize that North Africa sits in a unique position close to Europe, with the Mediterranean as a shared asset which needs to be protected for North Africa and for Europe, but also as part of the MENA region linking to the Middle East, and of course as part of Africa sharing many of the same challenges as other countries do in the African subcontinent. So North Africa faces significant challenges on climate and the environment, and Jamel just touched on some of those. It's extremely vulnerable to climate change with risks of water scarcity, but also large proportion of the population living in flood-prone coastal zones, affecting economies and people. So there are commitments to ensure that we meet the Paris Agreement and the 1.5 degree target that was shared by the world. But we need significant amounts of money to meet that challenge. That need is estimated at $180 billion for 2020 to 2030, leaving large gaps in financing which need to be filled in the coming years. The WWF North Africa office is well positioned to face these challenges. Our new strategy sets out a bold ambition for the next 5 years for strong leadership and capacity in the region, for strong partnerships, but also delivering strong impact on the ground and at policy levels. But we can't do this alone. Please join us in this journey. We look forward to and count on your support and collaboration as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Rajay. So, welcome, Madam the Ambassador, Madam Janet Rogan, the Regional Ambassador of, for Middle East and Africa for COP26. And the outcome and expectation outcome of Glasgow last year and expectation, and especially with some focus on North Africa and the African region. Madam.
Thank you very much. And good morning, everybody. Yeah, and happy Africa Day. Forward. I'm really happy to be here today. Can you hear me? Is this working? Yeah.
Yeah, it's working.
I'm really happy to be here because this COP27 is the next stage of the work that we all did at COP26 to finish the main negotiations on the Paris Agreement, the technicalities, some are still going, but mostly finished, and move into implementation. Implementation comes back into countries. It's right down on the ground because that is where the issues are happening. So when I'm saying it comes back into countries, I mean it comes back to governments, of course, but it also comes to the private sector, comes to civil society, comes to education establishments. It comes right down to grassroots levels, to villages and individuals. And each one has a different role to play. Yes, governments are up there to set the targets and bring us all together. The private sector are the ones that make our lives run. They provide us with energy. They provide us with food and water and sanitation. Education, healthcare in some cases. Sometimes it's public, sometimes it's private. We are all in this together. And climate is threatening that. Because as everybody has said already, and we all know, we are seeing more extreme weather-related events now than ever in our living history. It is affecting more people. And when we think about what happens with climate change when we get a big disaster in a community, we find that people's ability to access food, to access water, to access healthcare, education is taken away from them. So what do? They move, of course. They go somewhere where they can seek help. And that might be humanitarian help, it might be help in the community. They might get in a small boat and go across the sea to see if they can find help somewhere else because they are desperate. So these movements are all happening in society. And that's why when I say at the beginning, we all have a role to play, we all have a different role to play. This COP27, looking very much at implementation, really means in our context, a developing context, a vulnerable context, a climate-affected context, it means looking at how each one can become more resilient right from the individual level, the family level, the community level, the small-scale business level, right up to the top. And it's all of us in it together. Now, how can we do that if we don't talk to each other? Sometimes we find it's the generations that don't talk to each other. Sometimes we old people are sitting there and we're not listening to the young ones and we're not giving them space to speak. We say, you must listen, have respect for your elders. But actually it's the young people who have the innovation and the energy to take us forward into the future. Sometimes it's the young people pointing their fingers and saying, you people did this. You are to blame. So we have to reach hands and join hands together, not point fingers at each other in order to go forward. Everywhere where I've been visiting, and I think I have 72 countries in my patch across Africa and the Middle East, I see examples of how society, people, civil society, communities, private sector, are making changes on the ground. Partly because they have to, but also because they want to. They want to be better. They want to live better for the future. Recently, I was in Tunisia, and I saw a project there funded by WWF on marine protection. And guess what? The project helped But it was the fishermen who demanded a protected zone because they understood what was happening to their fish and the biodiversity. And then when they saw voluntarily that they stayed out of that zone, they saw the impact coming back. They said, we want to make it bigger. We want this zone to be extended further. And they went to the government to say, please help us to make this zone bigger. So actually, it's not that we need to wait for governments to tell us what to do. Actually, communities know how their livelihoods and their living is being impacted, and they have good ideas what to do. Sometimes the space for civil society in many countries around the world becomes very squeezed. Usually that's because of fear. But you know what? We can overcome fear in our minds. It doesn't cost anything. We don't need trillions of dollars to change our attitude. When we find solutions coming from society, coming from the grassroots up, from private sector who are finding their own ways forward, then we see the richness that each country can contribute to this change that we are all going through. And I say all because every country in its own way is changing to this that is going on around us. We need a lot more financing everywhere, yes. And everywhere the financing is becoming more squeezed because of all of these crises that are around us. But there will always be another crisis and another one if we are not addressing this climate issue together. So as the UK, now that we have handed the COP26 baton to Egypt for COP27, representing Africa, this whole year coming forward as we move up to COP28 is still Africa's year. This is still the year of action. This is still the year when we should be coming together and moving from the bottom up and the top down. And you can be sure that the UK, as we continue forward, will try to maintain the spirit of our presidency as we are working with counterparts at the global level and also in countries, especially across this region. Let me finish with a couple of facts that I heard in the last couple of days. Climate change, the temperature rise in this region is going faster than any other region in the world. And I'm talking about North Africa, the Middle East area. By the end of this century, it could be 5 degrees warmer than it was at the beginning of the century if we don't do anything. That could, according to scientific projections, models, lead to an outflow of refugees of 80 million people. I heard yesterday from UNHCR that the current number of refugees in the world is about 100 million. That is larger than the 16th largest country in the world by population. If we double that number, it will be the 5th largest country in the world who are refugees. Now, when we think about all of these pressures together, we see there is no choice but for us to work together, to scale up action, to take action, to mobilize, to work together, to understand where our planning is and where our financial investment plans go. And it is not only for governments, it's for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Ambassador. It's a lot of very important keywords: implementation, funding, listening to each other, and shared responsibility and time to action. The region also is one of the targeted region by the pressure of the impact of climate change from a perspective of immigration. The region in North Africa is receiving but also sending, not only sending through the Mediterranean but also receiving from the whole continent. So a lot of good and very important keyword. We thank you for that. We have a word from Tunisian Minister of the Environment that was recorded. So the Tunisian Minister of Environment, Madame Leila Shikhawi, visited the Panda Hub yesterday. She cannot be here today. She have to travel back, but she recorded for us a word addressed to the Africa Day. Is it ready?
Madame la ministre de l'Environnement de la République arabe d'Égypte, Madame l'ambassadeur régional pour le Moyen-Orient et l'Afrique, Monsieur le directeur du Fonds mondial pour la nature, Europe et Afrique du Nord, Mesdames et Messieurs les participants. Alors que nous nous dirigeons vers un cadre mondial pour l'environnement et la biodiversité post-2020, les changements climatiques continuent à être un défi auquel le monde entier et notre région en particulier sont confrontés. L'Afrique du Nord est l'une des régions les plus arides et soumise à un stress hydrique avec une forte dépendance à l'égard d'une agriculture sensible au climat et avec une grande partie de sa population et de son activité économique concentrée dans des zones côtières urbaines sujettes aux inondations. En outre, selon le rapport 2022 du GIEC, l'Afrique du Nord est l'une des régions qui risquent d'être les plus touchées par le changement climatique et qui risquent d'avoir le plus besoin d'investissements pour s'adapter. En ce qui concerne le financement, d'ailleurs, les besoins en matière d'adaptation et d'atténuation sont presque également répartis. En fait, l'atténuation représente 22% de la part du soutien financier nécessaire, l'adaptation 29%, tandis que les besoins à double bénéfice sont les plus signalés, représentant environ 57%. Les besoins de financement de l'adaptation au changement climatique en Afrique du Nord sont estimés à environ 180 milliards de dollars pour la période 2020-2030. Pour être mises en œuvre, les contributions déterminées au niveau national de la Tunisie nécessitent la mobilisation d'environ 19,4 milliards de dollars pour la période 21-30, dont 4,3 milliards de dollars pour l'adaptation, 14,4 milliards pour l'atténuation et 0,7 milliards pour le renforcement des capacités. L'effort national à mobiliser par la Tunisie pour les efforts d'atténuation serait d'environ 3 milliards de dollars pour l'ensemble de la période, soit 23% du total des besoins de financement accompagnant la transition bas carbone 21-30 envisagée par les NDC actualisés concernant tous les secteurs et non seulement le secteur énergétique. Le soutien international nécessaire s'élèverait à environ 12 milliards de dollars sur la période 21-30, représentant environ 80% du financement conditionné par les sources internationales et le secteur privé. En préparant et en soumettant sa contribution nationale déterminée au niveau national, la Tunisie a suivi une approche participative incluant les parties prenantes nationales et locales, les organisations de la société civile, le secteur public, le secteur privé, les femmes, les jeunes, en s'appuyant sur des réunions nationales, sectorielles et bilatérales avec les principales parties prenantes. La CDN actualisée tunisienne révise l'objectif national de réduction de l'intensité carbone à 45% d'ici 2030 et s'engage à réduire l'intensité carbone de l'ensemble de son économie à 45% d'ici 2030 par rapport au niveau de 2010. En outre, la contribution de la Tunisie correspond à une réduction de l'intensité de 27% en 2030 par rapport à celle de l'année de référence 2010. La Tunisie reconnaît également l'importance des stratégies et plans d'action en tant que voie de lancement des objectifs à long terme, notamment le soutien renforcé à l'utilisation du mécanisme du marché carbone et souligne les domaines dans lesquels elle se prépare à piloter des instruments de tarification du carbone, comme par exemple une taxe carbone sur la consommation d'énergie. La Tunisie s'efforce aussi de relier les vulnérabilités nationales et sectorielles aux objectifs d'adaptation et l'on se concentre sur les réflexions à long terme et la réflexion transversale relative au genre, à l'utilisation des terres, à la réduction des risques de catastrophes. Notre approche de l'adaptation s'articule autour de ce que l'on appelle l'étoile de la résilience, qui reflète une réflexion systématique au sujet. Ceci est renforcé par l'intégration des stratégies de changement climatique dans les politiques publiques, au niveau national et au niveau local. Nous avons également mis en place des comités consultatifs techniques visant à soutenir la mise en œuvre des CDN soumises à la présente COP. De ce fait, la présente conférence des parties constitue une opportunité d'agir au niveau national, régional et international, en vue d'améliorer la détermination des besoins et d'accélérer la mise en œuvre des plans d'action climatique et de la stratégie nationale de développement bas carbone et résilient au changement climatique 2035-2050.
We thank Mr. Leila Shikhawi, Minister of Environment in Tunisia, for her word and some of the good notes that we take from that. the new engagement with the global goal in the NDCs, the updated NDCs. And here I remind that among the 5 North African countries, 3 of them have now updated NDC in the 29 countries around the world. So thank you, Madam Janet Rogan. Thank you, Mr. Ajay Barre. It was a pleasure to receive you, to hear you. We hope that you find time to continue with us in this in the next panel discussion. And thanks also to the Minister of Environment in Tunisia. Thank you. So, time is running, and the Africa Day opening looked like Africa Day climate. Many things the last time. So I will happily invite Mr. Nicolas Chenet from Expertise France that will join us in this discussion. Please. Madame Imene Rice, Marine Program Manager at WWF North Africa Office. Amen. Mr. Ali Abdou, representative of private sector and activist from Egypt. We'll try to monitor the time in this discussion, and thank you for your availability and being part in this discussion. I will start with Iman, my colleague, as an international NGO, within also the hub of your NGO. Working in the region of North Africa and in Africa, working in the private sector and civil society, how this work to tackle climate change, how the goal of climate change resilient, working with those key stakeholders, especially civil society, how as an international NGO you target that from your perspective?
Thank you, Jamel. So WWF North Africa has been established since 1994, and since then we have been supporting civil society organizations in the region in a number of landscapes. Since 2017, we have supported NGOs in Tunisia and Morocco to join forces and into NGO networks to leverage their capacity for lobbying and advocacy in adaptation projects in resilience to support adaptation and resilience and local-led actions in areas related to forests, coastal areas, and water. In addition to that, these projects will lead to the creation of implementation of 28 projects by these organizations, thanks to support that is offered to them by WWF and the donors in a number of areas related to just climate actions, local adaptation plans, forests, agriculture, and water. And I think we also, through this project, we are also targeting media to foster storytelling on just climate actions and to give a voice to these civil society organizations. We do this in collaboration with a number of stakeholders, including national, African, Mediterranean, and international NGOs.
Thank you, Iman. Hopefully we'll find time for another question, but now we'll address to Mr. Nicolas Chenet, Director of Sustainable Development Department at Expertise France. It will be good that to start to explain Expertise France to the audience, to you.
Yes, thank you, Jamal. So yes, in a few words, Expertise France, we are the French implementing agency for cooperation, which means we are, since the 1st of January, part of the AFG group, which means basically we implement development projects on the ground, and especially, of course, in Africa, which is, of course, a French priority. We are the second biggest agency behind GIZ in Europe, so we are very happy to work on many projects and more, and especially in the ground of climate and biodiversity, which we try to link more and more in the projects we manage. well, I saw that this COP is the COP of implementation. We are fully convinced that implementation is the key issue. Engagements are very important, strategies also, but connecting these strategies and these engagements to on-the-ground actions is, we think, the key issue. And the multiplicity of the levels to connect of departments, regions, cities, and countries, and maybe regional organizations is also something that we think is a key issue. So the engagement should be completely mainstreamed in all these issues. We are very happy to manage projects with WWF also in North Africa, for example, including a biodiversity project, which is trying to build engagement in the sector and sectoral in the countries. And we try to define, especially in Tunisia, the priority sectors for engagement in the preparation of the COP15 that will happen in Montreal. So we are fully available, of course, for any questions after, but and very happy, and thank you again, Chairman.
Thank you, Nicolas. Ali Abdo, our Egyptian panelist and representative also of private sector. You're engaged in the role of private sector to tackle climate change. What can be that role?
Okay, I will be talking about personal experience here. I just arrived to Sharm el-Sheikh after a 30 days ride around Egypt on electric motorcycle. It is called the Ride to COP27, which is world's longest journey on electric motorcycle. It is a Guinness record, by the way. The initiative started with around 30 partners from government, from UN organization, from private sector, civil society, volunteers, and so on. So we are trying here to demonstrate how different partnerships can make an impact. We have visited all Egyptian cities, meeting locals to talk about climate change, listening to them, how climate change how the climate change impacted their lives. We collected number of stories. We visited number of schools, and we met a lot of people to show the world how successful partnerships can make a difference, a real difference here. Each partner has a role on this journey. The UNDP had a role, USAID had a role, the government has a role. We involved with a lot of volunteers, so it was about to demonstrate how different partnerships, how we can work together to make something different, how we can work together from different aspects to raise people awareness, how we can transfer a message in different languages to understand what people on the ground need, and how each partner can participate, and to understand what he can offer to tackle this issue. That's it.
Thank you. Thank you, Ali Abdo. But I will add another part to the question. So we know the role of civil society and the mandate of civil society, international organization, but the private sector is mandated to product, to sell, to commercialize. That role of speaking climate or mobilizing other entity to climate action, how can be made? Is it for private sector? Is it a fancy mode of having good picture? We are engaged in nature and conservation, or is it like strategic engagement from private sector?
Thank you for the nice question. Actually, it became a mandate for each company in the private sector. As we can see, especially in Egypt, a number of companies started to follow ESGs, number of them started to report these emissions, number of them declared their plans to reach zero carbon, and number of them started number of initiatives mainly related to climate change and environment rather than other initiatives. Especially in Egypt, as I'm based in Egypt, I can say that there is a lot of things going on the ground, especially since we announced that we're hosting COP, and I wish that these efforts continue on the ground and we can transfer the experience to other countries to follow the lead here. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. it was clear. Now we know that it's in their strategy, and hope that this pilot entity will be the model for other entities.
I may add a comment here, if I may. Without the private sector, we couldn't make such things. Okay, we have a support from the government, from UN, from civil society, but without the support from the private sector, we will not be able to do such things. So it is a mandate for them and for us.
Okay.
Thank you.
It's good to hear that it's a mandate now. So the next question to Nicolas. What can Expertise France role with NGO and the private sector in North Africa, or even or for the whole Africa, and what is this role from perspective of Expertise France, but also beyond Expertise France, the support in also mobilizing funds?
I think we are all pretty much convinced that even 100 billions won't be enough. So we have to mobilize and to have a large-scale leverage effect with all the actors, and all the actors convinced that we have to act now. So NGOs, of course, are very important in this way, and we are trying to do that together, including in the biodiversity path, for example, to mobilize all the energies in the preparation of this COP15, because I think we need a very ambitious agreement in Montreal, and we need, once again, very ambitious strategies. But after these strategies, we need, of course, this leverage effect. And the private sector, if it's not engaged, we won't reach anything. So, I mean, it's our role as Expertise France to try to connect NGO, public sector, public policies, and the private sector engagement, because we must all be linked in our role in the same direction. So that's exactly the role of Expertise France, to try to be sure that all the engagements are coherent and they are all aiming the same goals.
That can be heard from the global perspective of Expertise France. Any specific for your next phase of investment or partnership development? Any specific program or plans that target Africa?
Well, in Expertise France, and as it is a priority, of course, of the French government, Africa represents almost 60% of our activity, and we will keep on mobilizing more than half of our energy, especially in Africa. But, well, I was this morning, for example, talking in the West African panel about the resilient agriculture, for example, and the fact that we have a lot of countries that are in a very, very difficult situation and facing a very difficult situation regarding climate change, and which are, of course, not at all responsible for that, because they represent, well, less, we know, than 2% of the emissions. So that's also something that we are trying to mobilize also all the actors of science, because it's very important to be able to locate where the problems will be and will happen. So that's what we try to do as Expertise France, is to once again connect all these actors to make them the more integrated possible, and to be sure that the programs will integrate, once again, not only the climate, but also the biodiversity with nature-based solutions, or with, of course, ambitious agreements on biodiversity as we probably reach.
Great. So, more than half of the investment in the next phase will be focused on Africa. So this is what I kept, what the most important point I kept from information. Of course, we had a good collaboration with Expertise France, and it helps really to it's a mechanism that helped WWF and other civil society and private sector to go through the last period and that last phase, and to tackle biodiversity. Thank you, Nicolas. Last question to Iman. We are back to North Africa. as an NGO again, and you hear in this panel how we say many times private sector. An NGO talking to private sector about environment, about funding, about changing their perspective, and speaking about with the finance sector or also on a concept of bankable projects. How the engagement and the reactivity of the private sector, and how they are meeting their expectation, or what are your major challenge as an NGO in trying to engage the private sector?
I'll be answering this by concrete and projects that we're doing with the private sector in Tunisia. To start with, we work in two landscapes. So we work in the Majorda River Basin and the Bizerte Lake. The Majorda River Basin is a transboundary basin, and which is one of the most important basins in North Africa in terms of freshwater supply. What we did is that we identified a portfolio of green economy projects that are led by the private sector and the professional union networks, agriculture farmers and fishermen and other networks, and adding which are based in the catchment, in the measured catchment, and adding to that the financial institutions and financial mechanisms that are able to support the implementation of these projects. We were able we did this as part of the Dutch Fund for Climate and Development, led by the Netherlands, the Foreign Affairs Ministry, and we channeled 10 projects which we call bankable nature solutions related to water and agriculture. Nature-based solutions are in fact solutions that are not profitable only for economy and not only conservation. They mix both. So any entity that needs to make profit while sustaining the environment. And we have a number of projects, very good projects led by the private sector, who were engaged with us, who were open to this because we are bringing them support. We are going to support them with the origination of their ideas and then bringing them the investors and through a blended finance mechanism. So there will be grants, there will be loans, there will be equity. And one of our projects is a fund, in fact, so a North African fund. So it's very, very diverse and important for the region because we lack funding and we have to fill the gap to fulfill our NDC's financial gaps. The other thing we do in the Bizerte Lake, another area where we adopt the principles of the water stewardship. So water stewardship is the use of water that is socially and culturally equitable, environmentally sustainable, and economically beneficial, and which follows a stakeholders-led process on-site and in catchment. As you understand, this is a very holistic approach. So even in water stewardship, we don't exclude the civil society. It's an approach that goes from awareness raising, action plans at state level, to the governance influencing and catchment-based actions. And what we do now is that we collaborate with the Chamber of Commerce of Bizerte and the Association of Protection of the coastline of Bizerte, thanks to our partners, the government of Tunisia and the project's EcoPact. And we support 18 companies to raise awareness about water-related risks, for them to understand, to acquire a high-level understanding of their water-related, of their risks, to improve their water efficiency, water governance, and reduce pollution. And we do this using various tools. We use the water risk filter, WWF water risk filter tool, which allows them to first understand their risks and then produce water strategies and action plans. And I believe, Jamil, that this is one of the solutions WWF is offering so that we clearly and efficiently implement actions in collaboration with the private sector in the region, in North Africa and in Africa.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Iman. It's an important perspective that we are going through. We have more few minutes more for questions. We have a private sector representative who has international NGO, financial and technical partner. We have a high-level delegate, UK ambassador of COP26. So feel free to use this opportunity and ask question. Anyone?
Thank you very much, Jamel, for organizing this side event. Again, happy Africa Day to all of us. Actually, my question goes to the ambassador. You mentioned in your remarks that each of us has her or his role to play. So I'm curious to know, since Glasgow, what kept you on your toes since then, until now?
What, me personally? No.
Okay, as ambassador.
You know, 72 countries across this region, which is one of the most diverse regions, all of Africa and the Middle East, is an amazing richness of experience. Not only the challenges, which is a huge variety of challenges, but the solutions that are coming along. Every place you visit, you find somebody reacting and changing. I'm seeing more and more governments really bringing together all their different programs, their different programming, their different approaches. They're approaching partners differently. And I hope today, I should say, since today is also Finance Day, that we should be hearing some discussions even now and during the rest of COP about new financing mechanisms. Getting the finance flowing sounds like a technical thing, but for me personally, this has been something we have pushed and pushed and pushed before COP26, since COP26. The UK has doubled our climate financing bilaterally from to 11.6 billion pounds. And the Prime Minister just announced a tripling of our adaptation financing between 2019 to 2025. So in our own way, as one country, we are trying to contribute on the financing. But more important is letting people access it. So we've done a lot of work since COP26 on what is stopping people from accessing financing. Sometimes it's technical. Sometimes with the Green Climate Fund, for example, you find that so many countries are not yet accredited to receive funding. So even if they have the best project in the world, how can they get the money? How can it flow? So as a donor into the Green Climate Fund, that's not what we want to see. Also, and I'm not just talking about the national level, that's very important, but in fact, for most of these funding mechanisms, it should be possible for sub-national levels and organizations to be able to access the funding through special mechanisms. So I hope we're going to see that the financial systems and the structure has listened to that and is coming out with some solutions now in this couple of weeks to make it easier, because if the money does not get where it needs to be, it's not going to change. So what keeps us going? For me, it's this agenda which is urgent, and the fact that we have a voice. And as the UK, we had this wonderful opportunity with the COP26 presidency. And I have to actually, at this point, also recognize France, because without COP21 in Paris, we wouldn't be here now. That started it off. And another fact, and then I'll finish. COP21 in Paris was the first time that the whole global community recognized climate change as a rights issue. It's also the year we had the SDGs. So climate is fully integrated actually into development and also into peace and security through SDG 16. So the whole thing is together. And I do believe that we're changing. I think at this COP we are seeing a different spirit. Certainly from the side of this continent, we are seeing the continent saying, we know what we want. We are now a good partner that you can come and help, because we know where we want the help and we know where we want to access it. So I'm hopeful.
Thank you, Madam the Ambassador. And uh, I will ask the next question if you allow me. And it's maybe a reflection when you say the access to fund and funding special mechanism. We have engaged private sector that say now we are mandated to do this. NGO are doing this and trying to do this, but to Mr. Chenet, we can work on protected area in 2 or 3 years. We can work on biodiversity for 1 or 2 year projects. But in funding and expecting clear indicator and clear result on climate, what are the sustainability of funding? I mean, it's hard to do climate actions and project in 6 months and 14 months or 28 months. So sustainability of funding, even sometime funding, big funding on 2 years, it will be a problem, not a solution to do. But what about the sustainability of funding from your perspective?
Well, first, I think the leverage effect and the engagement of all the stakeholders is part of the sustainability of the funding, because the funding should not come only from international sources. It should come from internal sources, for local banks, from private sector mobilization. So that's part of the diversity of the funding, which will make the sustainability of it. But as an implementing agency, I would say the sustainability of the funding is something important, and the replicability and the replication of the funding should be important, even if it's from diverse sources. What is a key issue for us also is the fact that the development shouldn't be something that is done. I mean. On a replicable way every 2 years. I mean, we have to move and we have to change our action. I mean, we cannot have the same project and the same projects on and on in the countries. I mean, we have to show the international community that we have some local engagement coming in the project, in the countries, and that it's taking place, and that it's taking this place, taking the place of the international engagement and the international donors also, because we have to show this evolution. And once again, I think, yeah, the NGOs, the private sector are key in this role, because we have to show that the local engagement is replacing more and more the international collaboration, because that's the only way to have a sustainable action in the long term. So I think that's something that we are really keen on to see, and we want. I think the development and the cooperation has changed a lot since 20 years, and even since COP21. I think it has changed a lot, and we want to see the local engagement more and more, and it's something that we just want to bring more and more higher in the agenda, in the international agenda. So that's something that I think should bring the sustainability of our action.
Great. So sustainability of the action, local engagement and local funding. Also, we know what we need, the message, and sometimes in many cases we know how to do it in a lot of situations. They're telling me I have 3 minutes, but I'm trying to not to look at them, and I want to take this to the private sector and NGO. And feel free if one of you want to answer this, which is how to diversify your funding mechanism and funding technique and sustainability of your action. So we are speaking about diversifying, not depending on international entity, but also on local one and different kind of source. So building partnership, funding partnership is not a donor-implementer relationship, but it's a partnership to achieve goals together.
I will answer a part of the question. As Madam Ambassador said that most of people don't have access to funding, so I think it is a time to consider new ways to fund different ideas and different projects. I believe that during the past period we are doing the same things, same projects, same methods, same methodologies. I think it is a time to consider new ideas, new ways of evaluation for the project, to consider different communities and different things. That's my point of view. And over to you.
I would say that collaboration is key, because if we collaborate at regional, pan-national level, then we have a lot of expertise coming together, and we have a lot of, like, this is what we're trying to do. Without collaboration, I think we won't have the pipeline of ideas, of new innovative ideas about how we can solve the problems locally. And I think that we should also empower ourselves, because as you said, we do have we do know the context, we do know, so locally led implementation, adaptation and resilience projects should be coming from the bottom and from our region. And then also, as I mentioned earlier, one of the projects that was presented to the DFCD was a North African fund. So I think that we should also start preparing mobilizing our resources to have more local funds that will work in a blended finance mechanism, where we will have a bunch of financial mechanisms that could be used to leverage climate action.
Thank you. Thank you, Ali and Iman. Now the time is up for this first session. I will conclude that this is a good mosaic with the private sector, the NGO, the funding partners, the policy and decision maker, and the parties with the convention or the governments. This is a good mosaic, and this is how we can together do the work. This is right, together possible, the slogan of WWF. This mosaic of collaboration should be built, as I heard from you, with diversification of sources, with innovation, with supporting from a decision maker, with recognition of the requests, the needs, the special situation in each region, in each country, the right investment and the right funding support from from Expertise France and from other institutions, from UK, the doubling investment share. I think it's a good mosaic, and this is the good colors of today for the Africa Day. It's a good session. We need to close this session. We thank you very much, Ali, Iman, Nicola, Madame Janet. We have it's a pleasure to have you here, and it's a pleasure to start this day with you. Thank you all.